Okay, so I'm going to do a very short video on tissue fluid formation. So we're looking at how the tissue fluid forms in the tissues. So if we look at a blood vessel, now here is my blood vessel, and we have the arterial end over here, so that's coming from the arteries. Here we're looking obviously at a capillary, but we're looking at the arterial end of our capillary. And then the other end we'll call our venous end. So capillary itself is obviously single layer of endothelial cells to allow gas exchange, and then surrounding our cells, surrounding our blood vessel, we have our cells which make up our tissue. And then right at the bottom, we have the lymphatic system, which will drain into the bloodstream just before the vena cava. Okay, so we'll label this as tissue cells. And the bottom one as our lymphatic system. Now we're going to come across an important term. We're going to talk about two types of pressure. We're going to talk about hydrostatic pressure, which is the pressure due to water. In this particular case, we're talking about blood pressure. And we're going to be talking about oncotic pressure, which is the pressure that's due to osmosis. Okay, so those are the two types of pressures that we're going to be talking about. So when the blood comes in at the arterial end, it's at very high pressure, because obviously it's come from the heart, so it's at high pressure, which means that there is a big pressure for the fluid to leave. Okay, so we've got a high blood or hydrostatic pressure. There is also an oncotic pressure. Now, the reason for the oncotic pressure is that there are lots of proteins inside the blood, like albumin, which lower the water potential, which means that water does have a desire to go back into the blood. But this oncotic pressure, you can see by the size of my arrows, is smaller than the blood pressure. So therefore, the net movement of substances is going to be in that direction. That's going to be your net movement. So if we were put that into words, okay, we simply say at the arterial end, the blood pressure is higher than the oncotic pressure. Therefore, fluid, or water, ions, glucose, etc., leave the blood and go into the tissues to become tissue fluid. Whereas at the venous end, obviously the pressure now, the blood pressure, is much lower because we've removed a lot of the fluid, so the blood has a smaller volume, which means my red arrow has decreased in size. There's going to be some pressure, but it's not nearly as high. But my blue arrow, okay, if anything, would have slightly increased because there's now going to be even less water inside there. So therefore, the oncotic pressure is now going to increase, which means that my net movement in this direction, this end, will be into the blood. So in other words, again, if we put it in here, we'll say at the venous end, the oncotic pressure is now higher than the blood pressure. This means that the net movement of water, ions, etc., is into the blood. Any fluid that is left in the tissues drains into the lymphatic system. Okay, so that is how tissue fluid is formed. It's all to do with the differences in pressure between the blood pressure and the oncotic pressure.